I feel like I'm working and fighting every single day, and I'm viewed as a complete bum. That is my problem. I cannot tell anyone what is going on with me. But people will see me act quiet, and that's it. But what is happening in that quiet is completely, it's just chaos. I experience screaming voices. I go into almost a paralysis from fear. Just being absolutely exhausted and frustrated and just tired of everything. And just not wanting to fight every single day. People don't believe how insane I am.
At first, it was human rights issues that took me to tribal and indigenous cultures around the world. As a photographer, I wanted to bring viewers face to face with the people who were struggling to hold on to their unique way of life and their traditional beliefs. I became fascinated with the remaining cultures that commune with the spirits of rivers, mountains, animals, and their ancestors. While I was working in northern Kenya, I met Sekulin. She was a 37-year-old mother of 5. When she was 13, she started hearing voices and having visions, said she was feeling terrified, but her grandmother took her aside and told her she had a very special sensitivity, and then helped guide her through her crisis. Today, she's a highly respected healer and predictor in her Samburu tribe. Over the years, I've met many people like Sekulin, who could be labeled as crazy in our culture, but were seen as gifted in their own. People who transform their mental and emotional crises to become healers or visionaries for their communities. In the West, we often call them shaman. And I began to wonder, could there be something more to these experiences we call crazy? When I was back home in Seattle, I met a young man named Adam.
I was 20. It was 4 days after my 20th birthday, I went nuts.
Very compassionate. Be it animals, be it people, at a very early age, he was just really a happy baby.
Absolutely amazing. He's the funniest guy you would ever know. I don't know if you've seen that, but hysterical. Totally gifted athletically. He rode a 2-wheel bike at 2. At 5, he got into karate.
He ended up as one of the youngest kids to ever get his black belt. I think he got that when he was 11.
So in high school, when I met Adam, I was 15, he was 16. He had a cool red Jeep Wrangler, and he wakeboarded, and just really popular, outgoing, charismatic guy. Lots of friends, and he was always kind of challenging the status quo, so to speak.
He just knew what I was thinking a lot. I could be thinking of something completely random, and he would know it and tell me, and I mean, it would weird me out. And I've heard that from multiple people too, other friends of his.
I moved to Florida to pursue professional wakeboarding, and in that period is when I experienced that first depression.
July 22nd, 2004. That was the date. He started telling us a math equation that would solve all the family's problems. And it was a very simple one, but it made all sense to him, which of course to nobody else.
When it first occurred, It was very fun and exciting. It was just this total shattering, and my mind just opened, and I started thinking of all these different things. And in that sense, it was beautiful. I found it was the first time I had ever experienced a real connection to the universe, where I really felt like a part of this, that I was this was me. It was just like incredible. Then I kept going, and then I went way too far, and then it got scary.
And it was terrifying. Totally manic or totally depressed.
The rage that will occur in a manic episode is so scary.
You know, it's not who we knew as Happy Adam, Funny Adam, and then you had this Adam, like that.
I was surprised to learn how many people in the U.S. will suffer from a psychological crisis in their lifetime. And like many of the shaman I met, the crisis happens mostly in their youth. I met a young woman in New York named Akaya, who also had one of these episodes in her 20s.
I didn't know what was happening to me. I felt like my whole world was just exploding, like I was going into a whole different reality that I knew nothing about. I was very afraid to walk down the street because I thought people were all focused on me and judging me, and I thought everybody knew. I had voices that would tell me to cut myself. It was like the voices were taking control over me. The visions were taking control of me. I was very sensitive to music, to sounds. I started to have very clear visions of dead people, like just appearing and watching me. So I felt like I had eyes watching me all the time. I started to see my deceased father, and he would show up in my room. And really, it was the scariest thing that I've ever experienced. I literally locked myself in a room for months. I took the light bulb out of the light fixture, and I became completely enclosed.
There was about a 3-day period of in my room writing equations and finding God in my notebook, and then finally my parents were like, "What you doing?" You know, and then I checked myself into a mental institution. That is not the place to get sane. They put me in this holding room, and there was no door, and there was a camera on the ceiling, and I was just laying on this bed, and this little girl walked into my room, and she was just staring at me, just with this blank, bizarre stare, and I kept asking her to leave, and she wouldn't, and there was all crazy people everywhere, and they were able to just come into my room. I immediately felt in danger and scared, and so I just decided no, and we went back to my parents' house and just kind of tried to figure out what to do. They put me on Depakote, and then that just started the whole process of, oh, no, now he's crying all day, let's feed him this one. Oh, no, now he's barfing all day, feed him this one.
And we went from one doctor to another doctor and one prescription to another prescription.
He was on every medication, I think, made for bipolar.
And they always say, well, every brain is different. Sorry if this makes you crap your pants. Maybe it'll work, maybe it'll make you kill yourself. I mean, like the disclaimer on these pills, that's typically the first side effect, is suicidal thoughts. And that's what the doctor is giving you to feel better. I mean, it's crazy.
Hearing of the struggles Adam and Akaya were going through made me want to learn more. So I started interviewing experts in the field of mental health.
In the United States, we've come to believe in the chemical imbalance theory of mental disorders. So we believe that you have some known deficiency with a neurotransmitter, and the drugs fix that, like insulin for diabetes. It was a valid hypothesis that arose out of understanding of how the drugs acted on the brain, and then it was investigated and found out basically not to be so. I believed it. When I was a reporter, I wrote about it. Depression is due to low serotonin, schizophrenia is due to too much dopamine. And I called up some top researchers and I said, I just want to see the research that says you found that people with schizophrenia had too much dopamine, or you found that people with depression had too little serotonin. And I'll never forget the answer. The answer was, well, we never found that. And I said, what do you mean you never found that? Oh, it's just a metaphor, but it's not really true. Well, no, not really. And I was stunned by that.
I am very much against the casual and careless use of medication that characterizes American society today. These medicines are very, very powerful in helping, but they can be very powerful in harming. Often the withdrawal problems will be worse than the original condition.
I can look at any clinic I've worked at, and if they've been in the clinic for 15 or 20 years, they've been on every category of antipsychotic in the process. And the truth is that they still have the same symptoms, they still have the same side effects, they still are operating at the same level. You know, they may have been hospitalized 5, 6, 10 times during that process.
We've been primed to believe that with medical research we can find the causes of things and that we can create these magic bullets that fix these problems. So it fit into that larger story of medical progress that we believe in. We've been embracing this paradigm of care now for almost 30 years, and we've seen the burden go up and up and up. And if you have an effective medical treatment for a disease, at the very least, that burden of disease should hopefully stay stable or even go down. And we're seeing exactly the opposite.
I didn't know why I was here. I had no purpose. I didn't think I had any reason to breathe, and I didn't feel deserving of love, of anything. The first suicide attempt was I took a whole bottle of pills. The second attempt was me walking out of the house, headed into busy street traffic. I just wanted a car to hit me or a truck or just something to take me out, because this time I wanted to really work. I always felt like I was the problem, and if I could get rid of the problem, everyone else would be okay. I decided to try to get some kind of help, and I was in the hospital for about 6 weeks. I was put on several different medications, heavy drugs, antipsychotics, and it really changed who I was completely. I had gained 70 pounds in the first 2.5 months. You know, I just felt drugged up.
I felt like a lab rat, and the side effects were just awful, absolutely awful. Vomiting all day. I couldn't leave my house for so long from just like these awful anxiety attacks, and like the thought of interacting with people would make me sick to my stomach.
I was the only one who he could be around.
She basically terminated her job and made it a full-time responsibility to take care of him.
It took 5 or 6 years to get him where he could go to work.
You go through the whole gauntlet from, was I a good father? Did I cause this? Did we do something as parents? And the pain that you see him going through and the inability to do anything to help it are the toughest things.
I had no idea who I was. I lost myself, my identity, my friends, my family. I lost everything.
After 4 years of horrible side effects, Adam quit all his meds at once, which I've learned is a dangerous thing to do. And then he did a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
I went there, a drug addict, alcoholic that hated everyone, and came back a sober, life-loving, vegan, complete health nut. Like, no one knew who I was.
There was an obvious major change in his serenity and his peace of mind.
He quit everything. He was a smoker, a drinker, pot smoking, and the meds. And he went to that 10-day meditation, you know, cold turkey on everything. I can't believe he did that.
Looking back at it now, I really wish that I would have known these things and tried the homeopathic meditative approach first, but it was just kind of like a panic, I don't know, put some medication in this kid and just hope for the best.
While doing a human rights story on Tibet, I had the rare opportunity to witness a young monk known as a Khutin go into trance and channel the state oracle of Tibet. The ceremony took place in a monastery near the Dalai Lama's residence. Shortly after they seated him, his eyes rolled back and he began speaking in a high-pitched voice. Suddenly, he collapsed, and as they carried him out of the room, I was left wondering what happened. 2 days later, I was invited to interview the Khutin. His name was Tupten. He was 30 years old at the time. He said he began having intense dreams, severe mood swings, hearing voices, and thought he might be dying. The older monks recognized he had the potential to become a Khutin.
We're so locked into our mind and the rational world and the scientific world that when we have a spiritual experience, it can literally blow somebody's mind and they don't know what to do with it. And what's needed, instead of stigmatizing people and giving them labels, is to give people tools to learn how to ground and to work with these expanded states of consciousness.
For some people, they can be an opening to a deeper self-understanding, to deeper psychological knowledge, or to spiritual realms.
According to the research, the best place to be a schizophrenic in the world is not North America with all its pharmacopoeia. It's actually a village in Africa or India, where there's acceptance, where people make room for your differentness, where connection is not broken but is maintained, where you're not excluded and ostracized, but where you're welcomed, and when there's room for you to act out whatever you need to act out, or to express whatever you need to express. And the whole community might even sing with you, or chant with you, or hold ceremony with you. Maybe find some meaning in your quote-unquote craziness.
As our film progressed, we began hearing from people who identified themselves as survivors, meaning survivors of our mental health care system. Many had come out from the shadows of their diagnosis and labels by meeting each other online to share their experiences and to form support groups. Will Hall is on the forefront of what is called the recovery movement.
When I first was hospitalized, I was feeling so desperate that I wanted to die. I wanted to kill myself. And I was hearing very, very aggressive voices, and I ended up walking to the Golden Gate Bridge, and I remember dragging my arm against the chain link fence, and my fingers were bloody. And when I got to the bridge and I looked down, I really felt like I needed to end my life. I felt like I was this complete failure. So I was in really bad shape, and the mental health system only made that worse. I went to the clinic in San Francisco. My therapist had recommended that maybe I should try different medications, and I was buzzed into the clinic, and I didn't know what was coming, but the door locked behind me. It was like there was this wild animal that they had captured, and they were evaluating it. And I was put in restraints, and I was not resisting or arguing or being hostile. Finally, after doing all these tests, the resident psychiatrists who had been working with me came in and sat down. They said, "Okay, Mr. Hall, we have your results of this test. We have your diagnosis." It was this very solemn, ceremonial moment. And they said, "You have a severe mental illness. You have a kind of schizophrenia called schizoaffective disorder. It combines the criteria for schizophrenia with the criteria for bipolar disorder. So it's kind of like this catch-all diagnosis that is sort of like winning the lottery of severe mental illness." And they said, "There's no cure. There's no cure for this. You will be maintaining yourself on medication to manage your symptoms. We really recommend that you rethink some of your goals in your life. That moment was really like casting a spell on me. And they were in the process of transforming me from an ordinary, full human being into the second-class citizen of being a mental patient.
I interviewed a group of people that had been diagnosed for their mental emotional distress and asked each of them, what was your diagnosis?
Schizophrenia, schizotypal, schizoid personality, schizoaffective, bipolar 1 and bipolar 2.
ADD, dysthymia, depression, and PTSD.
Borderline personality, they put autism, they put Asperger's, they put manic depressive. I didn't think I was that.
Manic depression, bipolar, bipolar 1, and just one time schizoaffective.
In the era of the DSM-3, there were like 12 personality disorders, and I had 8 of them, and the perfectionist in me wanted to try and get all 12.
I learned that all these diagnoses come from a book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, published by the American Psychiatric Association. Over the years, the number of disorders has increased dramatically with each new edition.
The problem with DSM-5 is it took a number of normal aspects of life and pathologized them. Normal grief becomes major depressive disorder. Overeating becomes binge eating disorder. Temper tantrums become disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. It's taking the experiences of everyday life that are unavoidable, part of the human condition, turning them into medical disorders.
The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is basically a sophisticated way of not listening to people. You interview just so that you've heard certain keywords, you fit it into your framework, and then you've got a whole algorithm of treatments that you offer people so that when your colleagues and your supervisors ask you, what are you doing to this person, you're following the protocol.
If we used all these psychiatric tests on the healthy population, I doubt that anyone would avoid to get at least one diagnosis.
We think that there are people who are normal over here, and then there's the pathological ones who have depression or anxiety or addiction or schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, ADHD, or any number of other conditions. What I see is a continuum. These traits, to one degree or another, are present in almost everybody. And it's a mythology to think that there's the normal and then there's the abnormal.
3 months into our filming, Adam asked to be interviewed. He had just started his 4th 10-day meditation retreat, and painful childhood memories began coming up. When he went to the retreat leaders and revealed his mental health history, they decided it was best for him to leave.
The first time I went to the Vipassana Center, I had a memory of when I was really young and just being in a bathroom. It was involving a relative. I'm just like dancing around. I was molested as a child, and it was involving a relative. Once I realized my grandfather had molested me, I went to speak to my parents, and they didn't believe me. I'm losing my house, I'm losing my job, and I just walked away from all my bills, just looking into the abyss. And that's when I began believing that my mother molested me, my father molested me. My mind just, I think, it couldn't handle it anymore.
So if I have an unusual way of feeling and my emotions are really big and I'm having a hard time and the culture and my family doesn't support that, I can go off into a really isolated way and become very, very disturbed, alienated, isolated, more chaotic, more rigid, and you'd give me a label. And then we look at someone whose mind, that is their feelings, their thoughts, their behavior, is off. And then we say, oh, they have a bad brain. And then either you isolate them because you're afraid of them, or you give them pills or whatever you do. And medications are sometimes essential. But if you don't first start with communities of support, then of course the brain is going to stop functioning so well, because the brain is a social organ. Relationships are just as important as brain processes, and I feel very deeply that if we could make that clear to everyone, we could have a shift in how we actually take care of each other.
This is myself and my best friend, Maya, and she was a huge part of my life, someone that I could trust, and we lived together, we moved to New York together.
We wrote together, we sung together, we managed an art gallery together, we created a business together, so we were very much a part of each other's lives.
During one of my lowest points, she didn't quite understand what was happening.
When I look at her, this is not the person that I had originally met. And then she was on medication when she was in that hospital, and it was changing her. By my analysis, and I may be clearly wrong, but I felt like she was being very manipulative. There was a day where she got out of the hospital and I met her, and I gave her money for travel, and I put her in a cab, I took her to lunch, and she was supposed to go to kind of like a group home, and she attempted suicide again. I couldn't be a crutch for her anymore. And for a year, I didn't speak to her. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever done as a friend. And I think it broke her heart too.
I called her and I was experiencing some issues and really depressed, and I was like, you know, I don't feel like I can live anymore. And she told me to get over myself. And I just want to say, I mean, we've reconciled our relationship, and she's back in my life, and we've talked about this and held over these things, but that is the worst thing that you could say to someone. Another friend of mine understood what I was going through.
I remember actually talking to her on the phone and talking to her in person and smiling a lot with her and saying, this is not a breakdown, this is a breakthrough. It's kind of like literally breaking down a wall and going through another path to be that person that you're gonna be, and being willing to accept that people are gonna reject you on some level, your own family, your friends, and I connected with that. I myself had attempted suicide probably 4 or 5 times in my lifetime, and it took me some time to figure out that feeling inside was about not wanting to be here the way that I was here, not wanting to be here.
We don't have enough people in our lives to look at it differently from a peer perspective and say, you know what, I've been through this, I know where you are, I've actually experienced myself. Someone that hasn't experienced this, it's very, very hard for them to see through it.
Sometimes the music, she's just like a lover, she'll try to lead you astray.
I've been living in my car for 3 months, or a little over 3. I have incredible people in my life, and right as I lost my family, I found a brand new one that is incredible. This place, Soul Food Family, they are amazing. It is just a beautiful community of open-minded, loving people.
I think a lot of people would say that Adam was broken, and I don't view it that way. I think our culture is broken, not Adam. We say there's something wrong with you instead of actually addressing the fact that as a society, we don't have the skills to be able to support somebody like that.
Wonder what the mantis really wanted when she ate her lover after sex in the garden. Do you think she missed him at all? Or did she miss him at all?
He seems to just tune right into what people are feeling. I don't think he knows how not to feel it for them. I think he'd be a great psychologist maybe someday, or work with kids, and he doesn't need to end up in the back of a car.
Guess I'll never know.
Being here and finding that love and comfort and just the acceptance saved me. Without that, with just being in your head, having nothing other than rejection to what you're experiencing going on, is absolutely maddening.
One of the problems in this industrial society is that the so-called normal people, they don't want to admit that they're psychotic, actually. We live in a psychotic society. I'm sorry, we do. And what is meant by psychotic? Out of touch with reality.
Where does somebody who's in this delicate state, they're in a process. They're sent to prison, they're sent to jail, they're sent to a psychiatric ward, or they're chemically incarcerated, or they're homeless.
I'm not against medications, I'm not against hospitals, I'm not against doctors. I know many people who are benefited by medications, but we have a one-size-fits-all framework. We think that the issue is biological, the solution is medical and pharmaceutical, and we see it as objective science. It's not objective science.
Most non-Western cultures, it's assumed that if people hear voices or they have very unusual beliefs, there's meaning to those experiences. Only in the Western world have we developed this bizarre idea that hearing voices and having strange ideas has no meaning at all. It's just a symptom of these imagined illnesses that biological psychiatry has actually created.
While mentoring young photographers on the Navajo Nation, I met Morgan Yazzie. He said he had been having dizzy spells and hallucinations in his 20s, but tried to ignore them. They started to happen more frequently until he finally had what he called a stroke. His friend Sam Begay, a medicine man, did a ceremony for him and told Morgan he was ignoring a calling to be a medicine man. And I've heard this several times before. If you ignore the calling, there's a good chance that you could get sick and possibly die. Many say it's a transformation waiting to happen that has to be dealt with.
I couldn't go into the bathroom to shower because people were smoking crack. I felt like that I was about to harm myself again, and I didn't want that. And so I called the nurse's station, and one of the nurses said, come back, and we'll help you. I had an intake with the psychiatrist at the emergency room, and after him questioning me and seeing my records and seeing that I had been in the hospital for already 6 weeks, he didn't believe me. He said, I'm going to send you home, that you don't need to be here. I walked out of the emergency room door. I had just filled a prescription bottle of antipsychotic pills, and right outside of the hospital, I took all the pills in the bottle. When I woke up, I was strapped to a bed. When I opened my eyes, I was just like, how am I here? Why am I still here? I couldn't believe it. But I am very, very grateful for that moment, because that's the moment I knew that there was a purpose for my life. There was a reason. I didn't know it, but I knew that there was some higher being, some higher force that wanted me to be alive. And I knew that I had to find it.
Born and raised in the city of rain, and life's raining, it's pouring, it's not letting up. I'm soaked to the core, but I'm...
Ever since I can remember with Adam, meeting him when I was in high school, is his confidence that was what made him very popular, and people loved having him around because he was free to be him.
Thank you to the sunshine. Thank you to the rain. Thank you to the good times. Thank you to the pain.
And then I went into the Army at 18, and that's when we lost touch. I just heard it through friends that something happened to Adam, and they said he was crazy, and they put him in a hospital, and I didn't really know what was going on, but I was worried for him.
To the sunrise. To the sand.
We started hanging out more and meditating together. And at that time, I was in a very dark place. And the things that he told me about meditation, in the quieting of your mind and in going to that still place, because of the experiences I had at war, I was open. At this point, part of me still thought of him as unstable, that he was, as the doctors diagnosed him, he was using meditation as a means to cope with that.
I say thank you to the sunshine. Thank you to the rain.
I would be like, well, he may be crazy or not, but I'm still his friend and I'm going to talk him through this. But in that going along process of feeling that I was helping him, I realized that he was actually helping me.
In the shamanic traditions, you're not ever completely healed until you become a healer yourself. It's the way of the wounded healer. And as you heal yourself, what has been before a great source of pain and suffering now becomes a source of compassion.
People who've gone through psychotic episodes can come out the other end and say, that changed my life.
Those openings or those things that we call psychotic breaks, I think, why can't it be seen as a great blessing? That I opened to something far greater. That was a holy, blessed moment that released either the angels or the demons so that I could access the deeper essence of who I really am.
The Buddha wouldn't have been enlightened. Jesus wouldn't have been Jesus without going into the desert for 40 days.
There's a kind of arc or narrative that wants to unfold in the psyche. And if an individual is given proper support, a person can actually reconstruct their life at a higher level.
I saw a flyer about Baltic Street. It said it was for people who had experienced emotional struggle and had mental health issues. Went there, I met a beautiful, beautiful group of people. And these people were telling me their story and asked me what was happening with me and my experience. And there I was able to record in their studio and get back to songwriting and making my music. I did some painting. I really got in touch with myself again. It was like the first time that I was able to feel myself through the cloud of the medication. Going to their support groups, I met a lady who offered to interview me for a job that was coming up. They hired me for the position. It was part-time starting out, and then about 2 months later, they hired me on full-time.
For people diagnosed with schizophrenia, if we take a Western construct for a second, the average recovery rate in the Western world, with all our sophisticated diagnoses and medications and highly paid experts, is about 1/3. The recovery rate in the developing world is about 2/3 on average. I find that kind of interesting.
How mental illness is constructed in different places in the world is very, very different. I believe myself, if I hadn't chosen to live in Nepal, I probably would have been medicated or institutionalized. I knew for myself that I couldn't be in a society or a culture that was high-paced. I needed to move down slower. So it was easier for me, by being an anthropologist, creating a lifestyle where I could be out in villages on agricultural time, not on industrial time. I met a lot of people that you would maybe seem crazy by our concepts of mental health. And there's something over there that's called crazy wisdom. In Tibetan medical tradition, illness is not just an individual. It's something larger, and it's related to the environment. So when we start to lose that connection with the environment in a very deep way, I think other illnesses start to manifest.
M'Ngăduite is known as a powerful shaman and the leader of the Rawani tribe in the Ecuadorian Amazon. As hunter-gatherers, an intimate connection to nature is critical to their survival.
This is the root of this tree. This is somewhat of a grass that's growing up the trail here. And evidently there's a fruit of another plant. In this case, it's for respiratory problems. How they came upon this by trial and error over the centuries, I guess, is quite amazing.
Every 5 to 7 days, M'Ngăduite goes into trance and takes on the spirit essence of the jaguar. It's a process called shape-shifting that he uses to guide his people. At the time, I looked at this with curiosity and skepticism. Now I wonder if these rituals could be a metaphor that helps the tribe connect to nature in a very deep and spiritual way. They're not free of mental health issues, and not everyone who has a crisis becomes a shaman. But they often believe that non-ordinary states, like hearing voices or having visions, indicate the person in crisis has a special sensitivity. A sensitivity that can actually be a gift to the community. Then they give that person guidance, meaning, and purpose. I believe that's something we can learn from.
Hey, Philip.
Hey, Adam.
I got jumped.
Oh, no.
My jaw is shattered on both sides and then fractured in the middle from the rock.
Oh, my God.
Shattered on the sides from their feet and their fists. And then my mom let me know yesterday that she has cancer.
Adam flew back to Seattle the next day, and Ron offered to let him live in his garage.
They turned on you, one of them?
Yeah, they all just started hitting me, all from every side of me. Dropped to the ground and just shielded myself and told them that I didn't want to fight them. And they continued to just beat me. And one of them picked up, I guess, a rock that was guessed to be about the size of my own head, and just picked it up over his head and just spiked it down on my face. And it fractured my jaw in half right here. It just totally, all the way to the teeth, just separated this. And after they smashed the rock on my face, then I guess one of them was coming at me with a knife to stab me. While I was unconscious, my friend Rico shielded my body with his own. We were sitting on Baby Beach in Lahaina. We had a fire going. We weren't supposed to have a fire going. It was a magical place for a minute. And everyone just went in the circle of sharing how they ended up being homeless right next to me. It was amazing to hear how broken all of these people were and how broken I was. And that was what brought us together and what was making us all stronger. And it was just truly incredible. These people that had absolutely nothing were the people that were helping me. It's so good. Yeah, that's all I can really think right now. One second. The following day after being assaulted, my mother called me to tell me that she had terminal cancer and was gonna pass soon. And so that was incredibly devastating. I can't be there for her. I wish that I could, and I want to, love her the best way that I know how, but without my family's acceptance, I have nothing to give them, because I literally can't. There is so much about me that is not accepted in my family. The majority of what makes me who I am is not accepted. Take medication, you're crazy. That's all they will say to me.
Often families would come and they would have an education on what the symptoms of bipolar disorder are, for example, or they would know the symptoms of schizophrenia, but they weren't educated on seeing the strengths in their relative and noticing the things that their relative is really great at and pointing those out. They weren't educated on how to have hope for recovery. There's sort of a continuum of involvement. There's like neglect on one end of a continuum, and then there's overprotect on the other end of the continuum. And sometimes families kind of oscillate between the two. So they'll be really protective, overprotective, overprotective. No, you must do this, you must take your meds, you must, this idea of what everything the relative needs to do to stay well. And then it's, big eruption, so much fighting, crisis, and then they just swing to neglect. And it's human nature, it's frustration, it's a lot of things, but then neglect is like, you know what? You figure it out. I'm done. Get out of my house. You just figure out the whole thing yourself. I'm not doing this anymore.
They want to fix that person they love, but they don't know how. Because in fact, it's not easy, and there is no obvious answer.
We don't do this in isolation. We do this in relationship. Healing is about relationship with our psyche and with each other, with the natural world. Being socially marginalized and psychologically vulnerable is usually characterized in the West by lots of suffering.
This is in kindergarten. Although I'm smiling, in my eyes I see sadness because this was around the time when my father started molesting me. So it's a bittersweet picture. I was really confused about the world, about adults. There was a time where my mother dealt with the situation and took me to the precinct to speak to the police about what had happened. But, my father denied everything and, it was just swept under the rug. And my mother let me go back to him after he molested me. And she even married him later in her life again. So I felt really betrayed. I was always wearing a mask, I was smiling, just pretending to be happy, to be what everybody expected me to be.
It begins with the denial of childhood trauma in our whole culture, which then shows up in the medical profession.
When I was in the hospital, I was asked about my family history of mental illness. But what I was asked about was about the presumed genetic origins. I was never asked about the violence and abuse and history of trauma that I've been through and that my family has been through.
When I was a beginning psychiatrist, there were still kind of two schools. There was the uncovering and the covering. Covering was used just suppression of symptoms. The uncovering was you do something, some process, psychotherapeutic process, depth psychology and so on, trying to go to the core, to the underlying reason. And now what we see more and more, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the influence of the pharmaceutical companies, you see more and more shift towards trying to solve everything with this suppression of symptoms.
What becomes suppressed is our authenticity, our emotions. And then we become 25 and 30 or 35, 40, and we don't know who we are. And somebody asks us, what do you feel? You say, I have no idea. So then it becomes not our first nature, but our second nature, to suppress our feelings, to lose touch with ourselves, and to suppress our gut feelings. And then we pay the cost later on in the form of addictions, mental illness, or any range of physical illnesses.
This photo was a beautiful, beautiful time. I had just given birth. I was married, and I was just so happy. I had custody of my children, and it was a lot of pressure for me now being single, and so I became really, really depressed again. I started to treat my children differently. I always wanted to be the best mother that I could be. So when I found myself doing things like yelling and lashing out, it wasn't right, and I became depressed, and I said, I have to leave. I have to get away because they don't deserve this.
Living in the car, I mean, it's nice. I have my own little meditation pod. I think a lot of people would imagine this to be miserable, but it's not that bad. Like, this was given to me, this car was given to me. It's so hard to even figure out if I should complain or celebrate. I wake up and meditate and try and get over whatever nightmare I woke up into. The voice in my head that tells me to kill myself, to kill other people, it's just chaos. I walk to town and hopefully sell weed. It's about 3 miles to soul food, I'd guess, and that helps me ground and breathe and gets my heart out. Go and try and get what I need to survive and then come back. I'm amazed that I am alive for how close I was to jumping off of a balcony. 3 years ago, I was completely sober, vegan, didn't smoke, and active. I mean,
And now, how would you describe yourself?
Just a shit show. Like, an alcoholic, a drug addict, a nicotine fiend. Malnourished and crazy.
Adam is not alone. Many of our homeless are struggling emotionally, and it seems our jails have become our new asylums.
Prison bed can be $50,000 to $100,000 a year. It's more expensive to put someone in prison than Harvard tuition. It's much less expensive to provide housing and to provide adequate treatment. The best place to handle psychiatric problems is in the community. And the problem was that the funding for all this has just disappeared.
This is the one business where we're supposed to be spending time with people. The kingpin is talking and understanding and learning and listening.
If you talk to patients, for example, with schizophrenia, and although they might tell you many strange things, that they might think they are Napoleon or Jesus, if you show them respect and talk to them, it has an effect. They need less medication. They need less forced treatment.
The solution that is offered by our society is a Band-Aid. It really isn't a lasting solution.
During the time we've been filming Adam, he was trying to qualify for any type of housing through various local and state agencies. But up to this point, he had been unsuccessful.
Have you had thoughts of hurting others?
Yes.
Yes.
Like complete psychotic rage, where it's like any frustration, any sense of violation, anything, all of a sudden there is like just crazy thoughts of hurting people.
Just because there's a violent image or violent words doesn't necessarily mean that the person is actually going to do something, that the behavior is going to result. That's a conclusion that we jump to.
The truth is that somebody with schizophrenia is far more likely to be a victim of violence than perpetrate it.
I have had a serial killer in my head. I feel like what I'm experiencing is the integration of a fragmented personality that I've had my entire life. It's like I'm waking up the forgotten me. And it's the scariest thing in the world. I rarely express, even to myself, when these thoughts occur, I suppress them.
And this side of you over here is the happy Adam, the part that everybody loves that helps them with this or that.
He lives here.
He lives in your heart.
Yeah.
And then the shadow is up here.
By the time my heart gets over here, it says some crazy things.
And they scare you.
Yeah, I actually force myself to listen to it and write it. And I would like to read that. Wake the fuck up, cocksucker. Wake the fuck up. I wish you were dead. I will fucking kill you and everyone that you think you know. This is the place where evil thrives. Fucking kill yourself. You need me. Your father hates you. You betrayed me. I leave you alone for 2 fucking minutes and you get fucked, literally. You pathetic, incompetent fuck. How the fuck can I trust you? I am the only one with any fucking balls. Step down and I will show you what pain is. I don't want to read any more of this.
Adam, had he had the same experience in an Eastern culture where there's mentors and shamans, he might have had his experience formulated in a completely different way. He might have been told that he was gifted with sight, but that sight needs to be employed and deployed within a certain tradition where there's teaching and there's guidance, because it's too much for the individual ego to handle. Now, in the Western world, there's no such framework for that.
I met Namid in the very remote Darhad Valley. At 70, she had an active healing practice, working day and night, seeing people one after another during the time I stayed with her. One night, while going into trance to help a woman who was having trouble in her pregnancy, she collapsed. Then she got up and kept going. When she was about 12 or 13, she started having intense dreams, hearing voices, and feeling confused and frightened. She would often go into the forest alone and be gone for days, and her parents were extremely worried. Her grandfather, who was a shaman, recognized these traits in her and began mentoring her. While making Namid's portrait the next morning and looking into her face, I thought of her devotion to her patients and how much time and energy she gave as a healer. I was reminded how important our relationships are to the healing process.
Peers are taught to meet other peers where they're at. And a lot of time in other medical or clinical settings, you have this hierarchy. But in peer work, it's almost like talking to a friend. It's like saying, I've been through this, what have you been through? Share your story with me. I really truly value my life now. And I have a focus and awareness that I didn't have before.
What we're seeing happen in the US and internationally is a grassroots democratization of mental health. We have lost touch in our medical system from some of the simple needs that people have for connection, the simple needs that people have for community. And because the mental health system isn't providing it, people who've been in the system are starting to provide it for ourselves.
Today's session is about finding strength after trauma. As a survivor of childhood trauma, as someone who was sexually abused by a family member, I can say that I'm a survivor, of trauma, and I know that I'm not alone.
It's very, very important that we have storytelling from people who've lived through psychosis and who've discovered alternatives to medications and alternatives to diagnosis, because that's really the expertise.
Your story is important. You are unique. Own your title, trauma survivor. Find your strength.
Come on, Apple.
My mother, now she's facing death. Me sharing my spiritual side with her, she was open to it. And it was amazing. And she really did listen to me. And it was one of the first times in so long that I had been able to share my heart with someone in my family. It's been really intense on the family. It's been really intense on me. I see the death of my mother being a catalyst to bring a whole lot of necessary love and appreciation into my family. And that was what she was about. The first time I was diagnosed insane, I had something to say. And I've looked back at the things that I had to say, and I don't think any of it's insane. It's a very damaging thing to not be able to trust your own perspective. When you can't do that, that really fucks you up.
What we do in the West is to constrain individuals. People start to manage your experience at a level which takes your agency away, robs you of your autonomy, makes you feel like they don't trust you. That's not what you want to do.
Once I internalized a mentally ill identity, once I came to see myself as having this disease living inside of me, I stopped trusting in my intuition because it was sick. The only way to find myself again and to get back to an authentic sense of self is to feel all of this and to listen to it and to explore it and to not be afraid of it. So that's what I started to do.
I traveled to the Amur River in eastern Siberia, where the word shaman originated. There I met Linza, a very respected healer for over 60 years. She was forced to practice in secret for decades until the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989 and was just one of 2 remaining shaman in her Nanai culture. 9-year-old Sasha is Linza's neighbor in their village. Her grandmother told us that Sasha has fainting spells and hears voices, both considered signs of shamanic potential. Unfortunately, just 3 weeks after my visit, Linza passed away, leaving Sasha without a mentor. At the time, it seemed I was witnessing the disappearance of an age-old tradition in this corner of Siberia. However, as I later discovered, shamanism is re-emerging in very unexpected places. Akaya met a South African shaman known as a Sangoma living in Baltimore and began working with her.
She told me that I was called to be a healer, a shaman. And I had been feeling that inside of me, and a lot of times we need confirmation. And so that was my absolute, as soon as she said that, I was in tears. She said, her exact words were, "You should be doing what I'm doing. You know, you have priesthood responsibilities. You should be doing what I'm doing." I get on a packed bus for a 4-hour trip to Baltimore, Maryland, where my Baba is my teacher. And during that time, I'm just really meditating and just preparing myself for everything, because it is a lot of intense work, beautiful work, but very intense work. The Sangoma training involves humbling yourself completely to your teacher and to your ancestors.
What you have to do as a Twaza is submit yourself, your ego, all of your beliefs. You have to sit on the floor. You have to eat with your hands. You have to surrender to your ancestors.
A Twaza is an initiate to become a traditional South African healer.
During slavery, we lost a lot of who we were, but what you can't take from a person is what's in their blood. So if it's in your blood, it's going to be in you. The only way that she received the calling is because someone in her family was a traditional South African healer. Her ancestors that are in her blood, that they're saying, wake up, wake up. They're waking her up to them to say, you are our child, and this is how we want you to live.
At the start of my initiation, I experienced all of the problems that I was having, all of the anxieties and depression, and I was being pushed, and I hurt, and I cried, and my body ached. The medications drown you out. They mask you. They put a fog over your problems, and you really aren't in touch with yourself. You don't feel things. I've had to face all my fears, all the things that made me upset and angry, all the people that I've hurt. I've had to face it and be with it before I was able to release it and let it go.
Adam started turning a corner and moved into an apartment with a friend. It had been 3 long years since he was turned away from the meditation center and alienated from his family.
I had an opportunity for about a year to be an autistic counselor, and that was really powerful for me. I know music therapy is a practice that more and more people are looking into.
Yeah.
Maybe I should be one of those people.
Yeah.
Yes. My mind was just interpreting everything as hate and rape, and that's all it knew at that point. And you know, and that's what became this evil personality in my head that has gotten a lot better. Actually, my dad just called me before this interview and was saying he originally just wanted to be by himself, and now he wants to come hang out. I think he's coming over here. We're gonna have beers. Merry Christmas. That makes me so happy. That's magic. Now he's coming over to my place. I have a place for my dad to come over to. And he's down. And he's actually down to talk to me.
Ikaya has come a very long way. When she first came to me, she was very unstable, all over the place, not sure of herself, confused, and just not clear about who she was.
But like, okay, finally, I know why I'm on this earth. I know why I'm so sensitive to all these things and energies. I understand why I have visions now. I understand, you know, and I had to go find it. You tell your therapist or your psychiatrist and they say you're ill. They say you have borderline personality disorder. You have chronic depression. And these are the drugs that you need to take. This is what's going to help you. But nobody told me this is a spiritual matter. And you are gifted. And now it's time for you to hone these gifts. And it was just so amazing. I'm so grateful. because it has changed my life. I know who I am without a doubt, 100%. I know who I am, and it is the best feeling ever. I have a purpose and I have a reason to live. And the reason is the best reason that God could ever give, is to help humanity, help other people that have experienced the things that I have experienced, to connect with Earth, to connect with this universe. It is magical. And I am so grateful.
It's part of being human to discover meaning in our tragedies, to discover meaning and purpose in the pain that we go through, and to look beyond the specific suffering that we're going through and fit it into the larger story of our lives. That's just human. If you ask anybody how they survived an extreme tragedy in their life, most people are going to put spirituality at the center of what helped them. There's no difference for mental health problems. We have to recognize that people's spiritual beliefs and their spiritual resources and their religion are often central to what give them the strength to make it through.
The paths are many. Some find it through religion. Sometimes religion is an obstacle to that. In fact, often it is. But it may be a conduit to it as well, depending on who and how and where. There's this spiritual nature that if we ignore, we're actually ignoring an essential part of ourselves. Human beings have certain needs for meaning, for contact, for community, for acceptance, for authenticity, which is the capacity to feel what we feel and to be in touch with our bodies and to express what we feel when we need to.
In the shamanic traditions, there are maps and there are compasses that you can use to guide you through your dark night of the soul. So you're encouraged to explore the depths of the psyche with all of the despair and suffering, and to not get stuck there. To use that as a point of initiation to open you up to lucidity and a sense of personal destiny.
There is something so magnificently touching and moving to see how people handle trauma, because you see the splendor of the human spirit for those who don't allow themselves to be victimized, but become stronger and more committed to making sure it doesn't happen to someone else.
What I would like to see is that everyone who goes through the kind of crisis that I went through is given an opportunity to explore what it might mean, to present them with the possibility that maybe it's not just a broken brain, maybe it's not just an illness, maybe this is not just something to hide and be ashamed of, maybe it's something to explore and learn from.
The film process has been a perfect storm of everything that scares me. The interactions with an older male, and also the experience of cameras, of invasion, of allowing, sharing, every aspect of this has been like a perfect thing for me to get over trauma and like seeing, letting it, this has been terrifying in every way, but it's been also healing. Phil has helped me so much. Someone coming to me with an honest curiosity about my situation instead of an opinion. I hope that this film ends up showing people that they are okay.
What helps all of us stay well? Well, it's shelter, it's exercise, it's good food, it's meaning in life, it's socialization, and that immediately breeds a sense of optimism, a sense of hope that you can have a breakdown, but you can recover from that with the right sort of environmental care. How do we as a society provide those things to people? How do we build up that foundation and not just put a Band-Aid over it, but to really build a healthier society for ourselves?
I just think it's really important for people to find some spiritual path. It doesn't have to be shamanism. It could be yoga, it could be Tai Chi, it could be meditation. Some spiritual path that opens people up to their own creative impulse and to their own spiritual power.
There are millions of varieties of therapy and alternative holistic treatments, but in the mental health system, really all we offer is traditional psychotherapy kind of stuff and drugs.
Now is the time for us to be pressing for alternatives, for new ways of looking at things, for funding peer support groups, for getting options out there, for bringing the holistic medicine framework into mental health care. Bring them out of the closet, and that'll help fuel a movement that says, look, we're out here, we're not alone, and then we can build a movement that can make change happen.
I want to apologize to my children because of my depression, because of being, without shelter sometimes. I abandoned them for months at a time. I wouldn't call, I wouldn't be in contact. They wouldn't know what was going on with me. I'm so blessed that their stepmother even called me one day and said, hey, we have space for you. How about you come out to California? It's a miracle. To be in a space where I can come and co-parent with my children, and that all three parents in the household can get along and agree to do our best for our children. I've been away from my children for 10 years. The suffering that they've been through, I have to have complete compassion for that. And it's going to take time for us to build up a certain level of trust.
She's a very different type of person, but different in a good way. When she's been going through this process, she's been away from technology and everything else that other people have been around. I think it gave her time to find herself and figure out who she really is.
Miles did come to me and ask, Mom, what is it that you do? And I said, honey, I help people heal. I help people get better.
The fact that I falsely accused my father of molesting me, and the fact that he was able to forgive me and still have love for me, it's just incredible to me. I spent a lot of time screaming and punching things and just letting out pent-up emotions, crying, the whole spectrum. And the more that I would do that, the less intense those voices were becoming. I just really had to let it all out and not judge myself for it. If my mom were here right now, she would be so happy. The garden was something that was her focus. I mean, when she passed away, our family was in shambles. And if she's somewhere right now, she's smiling.
While following Adam and Akaya's stories, I often thought of the transformational process that takes place in indigenous and shamanic cultures. And I wondered, what if a mental health crisis was viewed as a potential growth experience instead of a disease with no cure? What if everyone was supported and guided to seek meaning and purpose in their suffering? If we took more time to be with and listen to those considered to be mentally ill, we might find there's a relationship between crazy and wise.
I pretended to intend this moment in attendance, forgot it yet again.
ascension, remembrance, remember to forget the graces of not yet. I agree to see what I agree to be my moment of attention. Free of what you mentioned to be my deficit. Won't pay you attention, you won't make sense of it. All that I may give to you, you take one less of it. What it is you hear, see or feel, a reminder of who and what you view to be real. How do you feel? Don't pay me your attention, I'll do you the same. Appreciate the fire's individual flames, making sparks within the dark for residual gain. May the fire grow higher in original names. I am me, you are too. I am you, who is who? I am we. I am free and...
Well, actually, ADD is what you may be. And I faithfully read the DSMB. And it's been telling me your sight's unfit to see. So I'll get paid to be, yes, paid to oversee your baby test rat medicated slavery. The only escape now is an obey me. So look, watch me pull this rabbit from this hat. Look away and look back. Not there? Imagine that. And we take notice. 1 hour segments of your deepest, darkest secrets. On file we will keep it. You'll be shaking cold, leafless. In a permanent mental winter where we'll leave this. I could have a problem if a problem was a problem to me. This less than perfect life is exactly what I need.
And I could have a problem if a problem was a problem to me. This less than perfect life is exactly what I need.
This less than perfect
I could have a problem if a problem was a problem to me.
This less than
Perfect life is exactly what I need.